everything that the baby goes through with the contractions is preparing it for life on the outside. It's preparing its lungs. It's preparing its heart. It's stimulating reflexes. It's switching off other reflexes. It is also enabling the mother through the hormonal cocktail that is constantly being released. It's enabling her to be born as well. We don't just go to sleep with a bump and then wake up a mother. The process of labor is specifically engineered to help us mentally, physically, and emotionally transform into that. They say a mother is born on the day that a baby is born, and that's so true.
This podcast is called Reconditioned because this is the place where you'll learn how to truly recondition your entire life. Where other wellness podcasts or platforms focus on one particular area of wellness or inner growth, Reconditioned is a one-stop shop for all of it, so that you can get all the information you need to heal and up-level the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual aspects of your life in one place. Because that's what I needed when I was healing from the arthritis I had from the age of 2 that left me disabled by 18. I got myself to a place of complete wellness after a very long journey of immersion into the world of healing, where I learned how to heal the whole self. My purpose now is about bringing that to you, and my Rise membership is an extension of that. For women who want to take their wellness and growth to the next level, there really is nothing out there like it. You'll be part of a global community of like-minded women with access to 14 modules that literally take you through everything you ever need to learn in order to bring your life to a place of balance and abundance. With group coaching calls with me, personalized support, community book club, and so much more. Rise becomes part of your life, your lifestyle, enabling you to thrive in the ways you always dreamed, with me right there beside you, championing you through your journey. It's not always open for enrollment, so if you're hearing this now, it's open and ready for you to enroll. Just go to the show notes for the link or visit laurenvakneen.co.uk/rise. Welcome back to Reconditioned with me, Lauren Vakneen, and thank you for being here. Today's episode is with my friend Dani Diosi, who's been my friend ever since she was my hypnobirthing instructor and unofficial doula. And I haven't done an episode about birth or pregnancy for a long time, maybe because I'm not in that space anymore. So maybe subconsciously it just wasn't top of my list of priorities, but that's not great because I am so passionate about women understanding their bodies, being educated on how to create the pregnancies and births that they want, how to create a positive birthing experience, and understanding what the body is capable of. And I do believe that every woman should have this right to educate herself on what her body and her baby can do in order for the baby to come into this world in the most positive way possible. Dani is one of the most well-educated people I know when it comes to this topic. And in this episode, she really speaks about what it is we've been doing that's led us to have so much fear around childbirth, what we're doing wrong when it comes to childbirth in terms of the medicalization of it and how that has led to so many traumatic births, what we can be doing to create more positive births, the physiological difference for the baby between a vaginal birth and a C-section or any sort of medical interventions, and what we can be doing to prepare for more positive births and more positive pregnancies. And yeah, it was really nice to have this conversation again. I do feel so passionately about women coming together with women having positive birthing partners. If that's not your life partner, choose a different birthing partner. We talk about this in the episode. I just know that when I was pregnant and even leading up to my pregnancy, I was immersing myself in everything I could about positive birth. And giving myself the knowledge and education around why the society was scared by it, but what my body can do. And through educating myself in that way, I was able to advocate for myself. I was able to find the information that taught my brain that I was able to give birth. And once my brain believed that, my body followed suit. So that's not saying that, every birth is going to be easy. Birth isn't easy. It is labor. But there are things we can do, I do believe, to give us a more positive experience, whatever that might mean for you. So I do hope you enjoy this episode. Dani has given us a 10% discount also for her hypnobirthing training. If you would like to become a hypnobirthing instructor yourself, go to mamaserene.co.uk and use the code LV10. And all the details will of course be in the show notes, so you can just click the links from there, as well as any of the resources that we speak about in the episode, which will also all be in the show notes. Thank you for being here. If you enjoy this episode, if it serves you in some way, or if you know of someone it can serve, please send it on to them. Please share it. Please share it on social media. Please like and review and rate the podcast. It helps other people to find us more easily. Thank you for being here. I appreciate you. Dani Diosi is a highly qualified and experienced hypnotherapist, NLP master coach, mind coding practitioner, antenatal and childbirth educator, and doula with nearly 20 years experience. Her deep understanding of the power of the mind, belief shifts, and the brain's ability to recode itself, combined with vast experience in all areas, makes her uniquely qualified to support women as they go through their transformational journey to motherhood. Dani offers independent hypnobirthing training and runs regular courses on how to support someone who has experienced birth trauma. She is creating a ripple effect within the industry to empower more businesses that work within the birthing and pregnancy sectors to include hypnobirthing. She has also written a best-selling book, Hypnobirthing, Breathing in Short Pants. And it has to be said, she was also my unofficial doula and hypnobirthing teacher. So welcome.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you.
It's so welcome having you back. I mean, you were here on episode 6, 2019.
Gosh, unbelievable. Time flies. Having fun.
So many questions to ask you, but before we start, what have you done so far today to support your wellness?
So I went for a walk with my dogs and my new puppy, and I had him in a puppy sling, which is the first time I've ever done anything like that. And I have got to tell you, it was like all my Christmases came at once. It was just, it was
having a baby again.
Yes. I mean, I honestly thought my baby wearing days were over, but there's just something about a little puppy to smell. And yeah, so
I know. Mine was big enough, small enough for that for about 3 seconds.
Yes. Not a good idea to carry him, I don't think.
It's bigger than me. When he stands up, he's actually nearly as tall as me. He's massive.
But when he puts his paws on your shoulder.
Yeah, literally. Yeah, we could dance. We could slow dance.
I recommend doing that, definitely.
I know. Yeah, he's so sweet. And congratulations on your new puppy.
Thank you. Thank you. You're gorgeous.
So we obviously had you on in 2019, but I wanted to get you back because, that episode was a long time ago. And birth is such a hot topic, such a lovely topic. I like speaking about birth. I think it's important for anyone listening to this podcast. We talk about all things wellness and growth here, and haven't really touched on birth for a long time, maybe because I haven't had babies for quite a few years. But that shouldn't stop me from actually speaking about it, because I love speaking about it. I think it's so important to empower women with good information, the right information, so that they can make choices around their births and their pregnancies from a place of informed choice, which is always my jam here, just to, empower people with informed choice. So can you give a little bit of a background on what you do and how you support families, women, couples?
Yeah, sure. So basically, I started off with just regular antenatal teaching. So I trained with the National Childbirth Trust 20 odd years ago after giving birth to, I've got 3 daughters, the oldest 2 are twins. So after being pregnant with twins and giving birth to them, I thought, well, it's got to be different. It can't always be like that. My birth was pretty textbook, but it wasn't it wasn't amazing. And I realized that I'd had 2 babies, which kind of makes it a tad more complicated, but I shouldn't have been left feeling the way I did. So I thought, well, I'm going to do something about it. And I trained to teach antenatal classes. But it was frustrating because it didn't matter how much I sort of emphasized about, relaxation. The more you can relax, the more the body's hormones can do the job they're supposed to do. It didn't seem to make a difference because people were frightened. They're frightened before they get pregnant. They're frightened during their pregnancy. They're frightened about labor when they go into labor. It's just basically one big fear. And then I came across hypnobirthing. And because hypnobirthing is working with the subconscious and changing those existing beliefs, that's what makes the difference. So does it guarantee a perfect birth, whatever a perfect birth may be? No. But what it does do is it helps people to be aware of what their fears are and where their fears potentially come from. And what they can do to counteract that. So if they're aware that they're getting an adrenaline spike, what they can do to kind of reduce the adrenaline, increase the oxytocin and endorphins. And that's basically it in a nutshell. So from that, I went on to actually qualify as a hypnotherapist, NLP coach, mind coding practitioner. So I work with all things mindset, belief shifts, transitions, transformations, specifically on the woman's journey.
Are you still doulaing?
I'm actually not doulaing now.
No.
It's just because I'm so busy teaching and training, the commitment to sort of being called out, God knows what hour, and being away for however many days in some cases, it was just too much. So no, unofficial sometimes on the phone, but nothing
like you did for me.
Exactly.
So I met you because everyone I knew was raving about you, and I was always going to do hypnobirthing, and I was never going to do NCT. I was just very aware that if I went into one of those rooms, I would just disagree with most of the stuff they were going to say. And that's not to say there's not some knowledge there, but I come from a very different way of thinking, and I didn't want to be in a room where I just felt too, I don't know, like isolated from my own beliefs. And so I always knew that I was going to do all my own things and do hypnobirthing. And it was such a great, it was amazing. For me, it was an incredible addition to what I was already learning and the things I had already discovered along the way. And you taught me things about what my body was able to do. But for Daniel, it changed his life. And I'm not exaggerating, and you know this because Daniel's written you the longest testimonial I think you ever had. I'm not exaggerating when I say it changed his life. What he said afterwards was, I always thought you could have a nice birth, but my experience of birth was not that he had any experience, but from what he'd heard, women have difficult births and you'll probably need some sort of intervention, and that will be how birth goes. And then he sat with you for 2 days in your kitchen eating your delicious brownies, and he was changed. He walked out saying, let's do a home birth. And and we didn't for the first time, we did for the second time, but the information you gave him made him feel, number one, he understood why he had all those preconceived ideas. Number two, he believed in my body's ability and the baby's ability to birth. And number three, he felt empowered to support me as opposed to being this random bystander who can't do anything about it other than maybe give me some food. He was literally a doula. And I will never forget how incredible he was as a doula. So much so that I didn't need you in the end and I didn't call you.
Which is the perfect outcome.
Which is the perfect outcome. Yeah. And for Braxton's birth, obviously that was a little bit more complicated. For Vida's birth, we can get onto that, but we're going off topic there a bit, but we'll get back to it because it is important to talk about that. But that's what it did for him. And he had this understanding of birth, an understanding of the true physiology of what my body was doing He understood what the baby was doing. He got an understanding of the hormones and what was happening and what we needed to do and not do. He knew how to advocate for me and my wishes, which was huge. And so he became the perfect birthing partner. And that was one of the true gifts that you gave us.
Oh.
And yeah, it was honestly like you really did change our lives in so many ways. And I think that people, I wish that more people were educated in the way that you educate people, because one thing you also do is you're so non-judgmental. And just to say also for everyone listening, this isn't a podcast about this is how you should give birth. And, it's not to shame anyone who might have had different births. This is about, I would like, I've brought Dani here to give us information on how we can educate ourselves to give us the best opportunity for a calm, positive birth, what that actually means, and why we should be working towards that. So let's start here. Why, as a society, are we so scared of birth?
I wish I could give you a simple answer on that, but we're going back centuries here. It's not just as simple as, oh, women used to die in childbirth. Yes, they did. But what is kind of overlooked with that statement is that it wasn't necessarily the physiology that was causing the problems. It was the lack of understanding of female physiology, and also the lack of understanding of hygiene and how to keep somebody safe in that situation. That is what contributed to the, ridiculous death rates, and nothing to do with the art of birth itself. In fact, when you look at modern figures, say countries like America, where everything is so technologically managed, it has not improved maternal or infant mortality and morbidity. So the introduction of technology, whilst 100% there are certain issues that, thank God, we have that knowledge, but in all honesty, it creates more problems than it solves. So we're going back since the beginning of time. We know that women were supported by women. We know this because there are cave drawings, there is vase art, there is endless amount of sort of proof that women supported women in upright positions. There was no pressure on when they gave birth or how they gave birth. It was, women used to be together in all aspects of the female cycle. They'd room in, they'd go in tents when they all had their periods. Older women would be there to sort of catch the babies and help the mothers birth their babies, and they'd be supported by their daughters, their grandchildren. So it was a very female centered focus, which it's not so far beyond the realms of comprehension, because it's women supporting women. When early religion came into being, that's when things started to change, because there was very much the sort of the message that was preached was to try and contain women's power, if you like. They were very suspicious of it. They were very suspicious of anything that didn't seem controllable by man. And obviously women weren't. They didn't understand how women could bleed every month and not die, how their bodies could change shape so drastically, and an actual other human being could emerge from their body and they'd get up and carry on. And you've got this period of history where witches were burnt at the stake. The witches were traditionally the older, wiser women of the communities. They were probably widowed, so they lived on their own. They were probably visited for all sorts of lotions and potions to help with all sorts of ailments, or they were there for birth, they were there for death. They used to gossip when they got together, and the males in the church, obviously the church was only run by men, didn't like that. So the women were accused of witchcraft, and we kind of know what happened there. So once that innate understanding of women's bodies had gone and the negative association with it, you get also the invention of medicine, but things becoming more sort of medical as we now know it. And obviously, because it required women to lie down on their backs, they had to invent things like forceps and to help the baby out, because obviously you didn't have gravity to help, etc., etc., etc. And it just builds from there. And then throw in the Industrial Revolution, where everybody was looked at as if they were a machine, and women were actually viewed as smaller, more defunct versions of a man. If something goes wrong, you fix it. Things were looked at as parts, including human anatomy. And that's why we are where we are. Throw in obviously the kind of the emotions that are attached to fear, and the legality, people willing to sue. And this is why we are frightened of childbirth. I mean, that is really trying to kind of write it together in as short a time as possible. But it's not something that's just happened overnight, unfortunately.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say also, throw in also the advent of pharmaceuticals and the money that needs to be made through that, adding that into the birth process, and the fact that people want to make money from it. There's been a lot more.
And exactly, you've got these very opposing systems. You've got the holistic, women-centered, women trusting their body, women working with their body, and you've got this technocratic obstetric mode of childbirth, which is what we have in most modern maternity systems. And it's trying to fit basically a round peg into a square hole. Every woman is different. Every woman's basic physiology obviously is the same, but they are all going to labor differently according to what's going on for them, where they are, what position the baby is in. And it's basically trying to cram all of that into a package marked one size fits all. And it doesn't.
Yeah. I read a book last year called Unwell Women. Have you read it?
I think I have it on my bookshelf, actually.
Oh, if you haven't read it yet, you absolutely have to read it. It's by Eleanor Cleghorn, and it really goes into... There it is. Yeah, I can see the colours. Yeah. Oh, you have to read it. Put it next to your bed.
Yes.
Take it off the shelf, put it next to your bed. It is brilliant in terms of really going into how women were treated. What you just said about women were kind of seen as more defunct versions of men. And it was exactly that. And our physiology simply wasn't understood, but no effort was put into understanding it.
Absolutely.
So my next question for you is, what have we been doing wrong in childbirth, and what are we still doing wrong that so many people, so many women are experiencing very traumatic births, are actually, many people are expecting traumatic births because that's what we see. And my experience, and I don't know about you, and you will have much more experience in this, but from people around me, is that it makes no difference whether you're at an NHS hospital or a private hospital. The rates of C-section, of intervention, are pretty much the same. And people think, oh, because I've got money, I can go and give birth at the Portland. And other than the fact that you'll have a lovely room and a nice bathroom and be given a lovely meal, from what I've seen, the rates of interventions are no different. So what are we doing wrong in our preparation and in our birth?
So that is a very simple question to answer. And the answer is because everybody is focused on the pathology, not the physiology. Whilst that is the case, they are going to intervene. They're going to be doing too much too soon. And that is why we have the births that we have. That is why the level of birth trauma is astronomical. That is why statistically you are now more likely to have your baby via induction or planned cesarean section than going into labor physiologically. This is why the national rate of cesarean sections we're told they're 30%. The World Health Organization, by the way, says they shouldn't be any more between 10 and 15% in order to save a life. And that's gone up, in the last...
Because it's not just to save a life anymore, is it? C-sections.
And the problem is as well, it is for some women, it is the only choice for them because they are so frightened about what they see birth is, and the lack of control, the lack of knowing when they're going to go into labor, the lack of knowing and understanding and appreciating how their body is going to handle labor, the lack of support, from the moment you get pregnant, even before that, every appointment that you have is to look for something that is wrong. You're told you can't eat this, you can't do that. They're telling you how to sleep. They're telling you, the amount of people that I have come through my classes saying that they'd like a physiological birth, but they're pretty sure it's going to have to be a cesarean because the placenta is low, and they won't know whether or not which way it's going to go until they're about 36 weeks. The placenta in 99.9% of these cases is low because it's a scan early on in pregnancy. And what gosh, my mind's gone blank. The scanner, that's not the technical term.
Sonographer.
There we go. What the sonographer is not telling them is that, or not acknowledging, is that as the uterus grows, the placenta is most likely moving up. So they spend practically the whole of their pregnancy expecting that they're going to have a cesarean. And they kind of get, and I can understand why, they get settled in that. They can sort of plan for that. That feels like a new comfortable for them. All of a sudden, at 36 weeks, no, you can go for vaginal birth. And they haven't listened to that part of the classes, or they haven't considered that they kind of need to actually do something like hypnobirthing or help prepare themselves. And we just get this cycle. So it's a very long-winded way of me saying that, but the answer is, whilst we're focused on pathology, birth is just going to keep going the way it is, and birth trauma will keep rising.
I know, interrupting an episode with an ad is so annoying, I know. But guys, I want to ask you not to fast forward this and listen for just 2 minutes, because there is a huge element of health optimization and reducing risk of illness that most people don't even realize. You need to be reducing artificial blue light in the home and get targeted red light on your body. The reason is because when the body registers blue light, your brain, based on evolution, assumes it's early daytime. But our brains in 2024 are registering blue light from our light bulbs and our screens at literally all hours, prompting our bodies to produce cortisol, the stress hormone, as well as other hormones we just shouldn't be producing at night. This affects our stress and anxiety levels, and it stops the cells in our bodies being able to repair and regenerate at night. And let me be clear, when our cellular health is compromised, we literally cannot stay healthy. And our amazing partner, Block Blue Light, have created some incredible light bulbs that allow you to switch between settings and have only amber light at night, which is what we kitted our whole house out with when we renovated a few years ago. And if you do need to work after dark, like I have to sometimes, Block Blue Light also have amazing blue light blocking red light glasses, some that fit over your usual glasses, and they can even custom make glasses with your prescription. They also have some of the most powerful and effective red light machines on the market, using photobiomodulation to help keep the mitochondria in your cells healthy, something we cannot be healthy without, as well as helping your body to produce more collagen for bones and joints and to keep skin looking great as you age. It also supports pain and recovery, and red light is said to reduce the risk of Alzheimer's because of how it impacts brain health. We can't control everything happening in this modern world that affects our health, but my personal motto is to mitigate where we can and put in place everything we can for the things we can control, and blue light is one of them. You can get a 10% discount across the range by visiting blockbluelight.co.uk and using the code LV10. Okay, back to the show. And that's what happened with me. I got told I had placenta previa with Brax, as you remember. However, I did have two very big bleeds, one at 20 weeks and one at 28 weeks. So I was actually on bed rest for 12 weeks. And as we spoke about before, children are often their personalities end up really reflecting their births, which we can talk about because actually it's quite interesting. But before we do, because let's get the important stuff out of the way first. So my placenta was really low, and they said, you have to prepare yourself for the fact that you'll need to have a cesarean. And I was like, nope, I will not. Well, you probably will. No, I will not. But here's the difference. I am fully aware that there are cases where there's nothing you can do. And of course, there are cases like that. My whole ethos in life is to empower ourselves with information that can, forward our education, make us healthier, give us different choices. I believe that most things in life are a choice. This is coming from someone who is severely disabled. So it's not like, if people are listening going, well, it's not my choice to be like this. Or we can make informed choices that can change the trajectory of a situation. So in my case, for example, I then went and did Spinning Babies, which is, a great online resource for helping move the placenta and move the baby in different, directions. I did pregnancy yoga. I went to my homeopath and worked very closely with my homeopath because actually there's a very specific remedy, pulsatilla. Not that I'm telling you to take it. Don't take it specifically. Be guided by a homeopath, but it moves the placenta. It's very interesting. And by 32 weeks, and I was on bed rest for 12 weeks, but by 32 weeks, my placenta had moved up as I knew it would, as I was urging my body to do so with no pressure but I just knew it would. I was never planning for a cesarean. And at 32 weeks, it moved up. So I could have spent my whole pregnancy planning for that C-section. And I didn't. I knew I was going to give birth naturally. And, but again, I did kind of my own work as well to help that a lot.
That's what I was going to say. You had, and the difference is when people have this, you had faith in your body. You trusted your body, which is saying a lot because, as you mentioned, your disability and the way that your body was for so long, but you had faith in your body. And that is what the majority, through no fault of their own, because we are products of, in many cases, we are products of a society that continually throws this down our throat, even if it's not an official birth program. It's a scene in EastEnders, it's the scene in Bridget Jones' Baby.
Friends, everything, every movie, every rom-com, it's the woman screaming and I'm in labor. I've never experienced pain like this.
Emergency, when actually, not always, but actually labor can take a long time, and that's fine. But it gives and has given expectations and understandings and beliefs to both women and men. You said yourself that Daniel's beliefs about the process, not that he personally had given birth, but that the things he'd watched, the stories he'd heard, etc. And we're not surrounded by women giving birth the whole time. For many of us, when we have a baby, it is the first time really in our conscious memory that we are thinking about, right, well, how's this baby gonna come out? If we were surrounded by it, if we lived in, I don't know, indigenous cultures where your mothers, aunts, sisters, cousins are having babies all the time, it wouldn't be such a thing. But for the vast majority of us, it happens once, twice, 3 times. And very much depending on what your family's experiences have been, because they're your kind of primary source of information, this belief of what birth is like is going to be deeply embedded. And you cannot change that just by someone saying, just breathe and you'll be fine. The work has to be at a subconscious level, because otherwise the subconscious thinks it's protecting you and, does everything in its power to keep you safe, which, sets off a whole load of actually counterproductive hormones when it comes to birth. So unfortunately, despite the fact that we are born with the ability to give birth to our children, just like every other mammal on the planet, for modern women to give birth the way that physiology has created us to do so, we have to put in a hell of a lot of work to override those existing belief systems. And I think for many people, maybe they don't appreciate the amount of work. Maybe they feel, I mean, I'm talking generally, but maybe they feel it's like too much work. It's not luck, is basically what I'm saying. It is,
right.
It's focus on doing what their body needs them to doing and trusting their body. And for some more than others, it's a lot of work to get to that mindset.
I like how you said it's not luck, because, you know, a lot of people said that to me. Oh, you were so lucky you had good births. And it really actually irked me, because I didn't have good births because I just happened to have good births. I really did prepare for my births more than I, prepared the nursery and all of that. I prepared for birth. I was preparing for birth from the beginning.
Yeah.
And as you know, Braxton's birth was not easy. It was a challenging birth. I was in labor for 24 hours in active labor, and he was back to back. And in back to back labors, you don't get respite between contractions. And I truly believe, and you've told me this before, had I not have done all the prep work and the hypnobirthing with you, and Daniel not been so calm throughout it all, because that was a big thing. If I had a partner that was going, oh, this isn't right, and you had the contractions, and why are you not having respite, and this is going on too long, I would have, oxytocin would have gone down, cortisol would have gone up. And you had said to me, like, you probably would have ended up having intervention. And I happened to be very fortunate that the midwife on duty happened to be a hypnobirthing instructor as well. There were no other women in the ward that night. They all came in the next day, which was amazing. So she let me stay in the water, and we were just carrying on. Obviously I wasn't in the water from the entire 24 hours, but towards the end, it would have been a prune. And she had said as well, like, if it was anyone else and you weren't so calm, we would have had to intervene. And again, I just want to stress to anyone listening, I'm not tooting my own horn here in any way. There is plenty in parenting I have done wrong. This is just about, right, we all do, but this is just, I'm so passionate about birth and about women knowing the power of their bodies. One thing that never faltered in me for a moment during my birth was my body's ability to birth this baby, and my baby's ability to birth itself, regardless of the fact that he was back to back. And it was really painful, and it was very difficult. It is labor after all. It's not, no one's saying it's easy.
No, but there's a reason for that. That's the other thing. It's kind of, we fear the pain. And I never, ever have taught about, if you do it correctly, if you do hypnobirthing correctly, you won't feel any pain, because I think that's a load of BS. It's, you feel the contractions for a reason.
So what is the reason? So take us through that and the difference between contraction pain and, say, if you were to break your leg.
Absolutely. Okay, so we suffer pain because it's the body's way of telling us that there's something wrong. This is what we call pathological pain. There is something wrong. The warning sign is that you feel pain. You need to do something about it, or stop doing what you're doing to cause pain. The ability to feel pain is actually a very important survival element, because, if I put my hand in fire and I didn't feel the pain, my hand would get seriously damaged. So this is why we feel pain. We also feel pain when we work muscles. So if anybody exercises or runs or lifts weight, you feel those muscles contracting. You feel the sensation. It is a physical sensation. But in that case, it's a sensation of your body working, a muscle working, and that is physiology. Most people think that labor pain falls into the category of pathology. And again, that is not helped by the fact that people constantly talk about, oh, you've never known pain like it. Women have to suffer the pain of childbirth. And this, by the way, was the message that goes all the way back to ancient religion, because the translation from the Bible of women suffering in childbirth was to keep women in their place, because
Eve sinned, and so you will now suffer.
terrible woman. This is what women is like. So therefore, her punishment is to bleed monthly and suffer in childbirth. Now, interestingly, the word that is used to describe Eve's punishment is the same word that is used to describe Adam's punishment, and apparently appears something like 14 other times in the Old Testament. Only in all those other occasions, apart from when it's referring to Eve, it's translated as hard work. Only when it's in regards to Eve is it translated as suffering. So this message has come all the way through, and it's compounded and compounded and compounded and compounded. When you start to look at what actually is going on, so again, I use the word contraction. A lot of hypnobirthing practices don't. They use words like surge and wave. Fine, different strokes for different folks, but the muscle is contracting. By creating fear around that word, you're creating fear of the thing itself. So a contraction is happening. The muscle, the uterus, which is a big muscle, is contracting. You are going to feel it. The reason that we feel it is several. It tells us where we are in labor, i.e., do you have time to, in ancient time, gather the wood, gather the berries, make sure you've got enough supplies in your cave, that your cavelings are being looked after. Today, do I have time to go and get the shopping done in Sainsbury's or sort my older child out? As the contractions kind of increase and the intensity increases and labor progresses, it's our body's way of getting us to absolutely focus inward on what our body and our baby needs us to do. So being able to focus on those sensations rather than be distracted from them it's our body's way of communicating. What do we need to do to help the baby turn from a back-to-back position or negotiate its way through the pelvis? Because not everybody's pelvises are the same. Some babies will naturally go into the pelvis in back-to-back. It's a variation of normal. That's okay. If you don't feel that sensation, then what's happening is you are probably going to be reclined on your back. That's going to compound the issue, make the position even more complicated, which is going to lead to intervention, etc. The fact that we can feel the contractions tells us what positions are supporting us and what positions are going against us. The vast, vast, vast majority of women are going to find labouring on their back agony, because we're not supposed to labour on our backs. It's our body's way of saying, get up.
So of course we're going to want the epidural because we're like, this isn't okay.
Absolutely. And it isn't on your back. It absolutely isn't. That's not fair. If a woman doesn't want to be on her back, it is cruel to make her be on her back, because she's not being enabled to find a position that makes the contractions manageable. They tell us when the baby is coming, because the contractions change when the body starts to push the baby out. There's this kind of point almost of no return when the body is saying, right, you just need to make sure now that there really are no predators around. This is what we know as the transition stage, which is typically the most intense part of labour for women, because the contractions, as the uterus is changing its role from opening to pushing, adrenaline is introduced, which lowers the oxytocin and endorphins to make the mother hyper aware of her surroundings. Because if a predator came along at that point, she could either stop the labour and run to safety, or she'd have to birth it really quickly so she could get her baby away. When you start to push, that feels different again. Baby is coming. That urge to push is your body's way of saying, baby's coming. Be prepared to have your baby. Everything that the baby goes through with the contractions is preparing it for life on the outside. It's preparing its lungs. It's preparing its heart. It's stimulating reflexes. It's switching off other reflexes. It is also enabling the mother through the hormonal cocktail that is constantly being released. It's enabling her to be born as well. We don't just go to sleep with a bump and then wake up a mother. The process of labor is specifically engineered to help us mentally, physically, and emotionally transform into that. They say a mother is born on the day that a baby is born. And that's so true. And also, most importantly, perhaps, the contractions act as a messaging system. So labor works because the hormones cross the blood-brain barrier. The contractions, the oxytocin rather, is released from the pituitary gland in the brain, which is what causes the contraction. The fact that we experience the contraction sends a message back to the brain to produce more of the hormones. So we feel it for a reason. And part of the way that I teach, when I teach hypnobirthing anyway, is, and when I train my practitioners to teach it, is to reframe or help their clients to reframe what it is that they're feeling. That contractions are needed, they are necessary, they are powerful. And yes, at times they are really, really tough. But women are strong, and it is tapping into that faith, tapping into that ability. I'm getting really passionate about it. Sorry, I need to kind of but
sorry.
You know, saying that, the vast majority of modern maternity practices do not allow the hormones to get to the levels that they need to. You know, as well as the hormones that cause contractions, we have hormones that are our own natural painkillers, the endorphins. Endorphins actually translates as the morphine within, and it's our own personal brand of morphine that is specifically engineered for us. And the oxytocin and endorphins, they work in conjunction, they work together. The more oxytocin, the more endorphins, and vice versa. Going into a strange place, being put on a clock, being examined, you know, the subconscious associations we have in many cases with hospitals, all of that is going to interrupt that hormonal play. So I'm not here saying every woman should have a home birth, because I completely respect that it's not everybody's choice. But it's having that understanding that if you are birthing in hospital, you absolutely need to batten down the hatches, arm yourself, you know, with as much knowledge and resources as possible in order to counteract, you know, the negative effect that being in hospital, or having a midwife who you've never met before, or hearing other women in labour could potentially have on your body's physiology. I can't remember what the original question was, so I don't think I've probably gone off on a tangent.
No, but it was great. It was fun.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so things like really bright lights, which we know, I mean, just from my health optimization stuff, you know, bright lights, especially like LED fluorescent blue lights, they increase cortisol. So anything that's increasing cortisol is reducing oxytocin.
Yeah.
The doctor walks in, or, you know, and that was something you taught me actually, that, you know, when we see doctors, we have this kind of instinct of extra cortisol. And we want to see other calm women who know how to birth babies. So the stress is causing the birth hormones to kind of retreat. So it's the stress itself that is causing us to have, you know, more difficult births, the stress and the fear. Can you talk us through just a little, I mean, obviously this can go really deep, and, you know, so much of this is in your book and in your courses and everything, but what is the difference for the baby of having a physiological birth, you know, going through, you know, the whole birth canal, and having a cesarean? And again, no judgment, no shame, you know, for anyone listening, hopefully women listening now who were maybe considering their options and now having a think about, well, you know, let me listen to this and see, I didn't realize maybe that there was a difference, or that the baby's health could be impacted later on. So what are the differences for the baby?
Okay, so again, like just echoing what you say about there is no judgment. And actually, if for whatever reason a cesarean is the choice that is made, you know, I always say you don't have to justify your choices to anyone. But it's important to, if you know what is taken away or what is not achieved by having a cesarean or having an induction or you know, whatever it might be, then you know what you can do to try and counteract that as much as possible. So, for example, I think all babies, regardless of how they're born, should go for some sort of cranial treatment after they're born, especially if they've been born instrumentally or surgically, knowing that. Doing skin to skin can really, really help to impact on the hormones. So, you know, I'm talking, when I answer this question, I'm talking completely from the physiology, black and white, rather than, you know, what the context is for different situations.
Yeah.
But when we look on a sort of a sliding scale, the best way for a baby to be born is vaginally, physiologically. Okay, so I stress the difference. You can have a vaginal birth, but it's not a physiological birth. Vaginal birth would count as a vaginal birth, but there may have been induction involved. It might have been instrumental with forceps or ventouse. So the best way for a baby to be born is physiologically. The next best, if you like, is start off labor and then end up with a cesarean, and then it would be a planned cesarean, simply because when the baby is ready to be born and the mother's body is ready to go into labor, and nobody knows exactly why this happens when it does, but it's thought to be because there is a substance that coats the baby's lungs. I always get this word wrong. Surfactant. Or if I say it the other word, it sounds vaguely rude. So I think it is maybe surfactant. And they think that because the baby's lungs are now at a stage where they are mature enough to do the breathing outside the body, because obviously whilst the baby's inside, those lungs aren't expanding, all the oxygen is coming through the umbilical cord. But when the baby's lungs are mature enough for it to survive on the outside world, a little bit of that substance leaks into the mother's bloodstream. This is a theory. Okay, this is not sort of been proved definitively. That happens, and that starts a cocktail of hormones, which includes the prostaglandins, which start to soften and ripen the cervix and switch on the oxytocin receptors. Obviously, the oxytocin increases. That's having an effect with the contractions that are starting to kind of bring that cervix forward and start to thin it and open it. The endorphins, etc. The actual act of the contraction, when the uterus squeezes the blood vessels of the placenta. So in other words, it's actually cutting off or reducing the oxygen supply to the baby during a contraction. That is actually helping the baby's lungs to think, okay, I'm getting ready to start working now. And the baby lowers its heart rate to be able to cope with that. And that is helping to kind of mature its heart. And again, kind of feeds back to the lungs. This is why oxytocin is released in pulses. So even though you didn't get a break from the discomfort when you said you were back, Brax was back to back, Brax would have done. So that's all right then. Because the contraction...
Sounds about right.
Exactly. The contraction would have eased off. So the restriction on the blood vessels relaxes. The baby's heart rate can return to normal. And that's what happens all the way through. As the baby is being squeezed through the birth canal, it's actually getting rid of a lot of fluid that's in the baby's lungs, because obviously it's kind of swallowing all the amniotic fluid whilst it's in utero. The act of coming through the vaginal birth canal and the head coming under the pubic bone and the position doing that, I can never remember the name of the reflexes, but it's very, very specific. It stops the, my mind's gone completely blank. I can't remember the name of it at all, but it stops that wiggly movement. So when you see a lot of children who maybe can't sit still, that's because that reflex hasn't been switched off.
Oh, interesting.
And it, the whole process of the baby being squeezed through the birth canal, squeezed through the pelvis, the turning, that is stimulating the baby's nervous system. So we are the only mammals where it appears to be, and I'm sort of loath to use this word, but again, it's about reframing it, more of a struggle to give birth, because our babies need to turn to come through the pelvis. Whereas, say, chimpanzees, for example, their pelvises are straight up and down. So the baby just falls through. But all other mammals will lick their babies when they're born. So they get that sort of nerve stimulation after they come out. Humans don't tend to do that, although obviously a brand new baby is completely edible and delicious, but we don't tend to lick our babies. So, the process of being squeezed through the birth canal is doing that. It's stimulating all the nerves. It's getting everything ready for life on the outside. Also, all the good bacteria that the baby comes into contact with. So as it's going through the birth canal, especially if the amniotic fluid, the bags have broken, it's kind of in this microbiome soup of good bacteria, which is helping the baby to prepare for life on the outside. Because obviously in utero, completely sterile, out there, it isn't. So it helps with the baby's antibodies. It helps with the baby's digestion. It gives the baby an extra dose of what it needs. The vaginal fluid, the fact that most mothers will poo just as the baby's coming out. And, that's obviously that some people kind of go, ugh. But if it wasn't supposed to happen, it wouldn't happen. Every single thing happens for a reason. And it's all to do with the microbiome. And I'm sure, you've spoken lots about this. So a baby that isn't born that way doesn't have those benefits. So, for example, if there's been induction and there has been syntocinon, which is the synthetic form of oxytocin used, that doesn't give the same pauses and the same breaks as natural oxytocin does. It just goes straight into the bloodstream and causes a physical reaction. And there's no let up, or not as much let up. So the baby can start to show signs of distress. The mother as well often opts for an epidural, because the enforced physical response of the uterus to the syntocinon is much more intense than physiological birth, where you have that sort of natural buildup of contractions and therefore hormones. And that does all sorts of things. For example, the epidural change the tone of the pelvic floor, so the baby hasn't got anything to rotate against. That is in turn going to have an effect on the reflexes. The fact that potentially the baby's going to show signs of going into distress probably means the birth has to be, sped up. So the baby needs to be helped out. It's not going to have had the same hormones, it's not going to have the same experience, it's not going to have its reflexes switched on and switched off. And a baby that is born by cesarean, especially when the mother hasn't gone into labor naturally, it doesn't know it's going to be born. It's swimming around in there one minute, and the next minute the sunroof opens and out it pops. So apart from the fact that it hasn't experienced all those benefits of being squeezed through the birth canal, it's a bit of a shock, as you can imagine. So those are the differences. Not to say that if you know that, if you're forewarned, you can be forearmed. And obviously there are lots of things that you can do to kind of replace the oxytocin, because that's the other thing. The baby, a lot of the modern birth practices minimize the amount of oxytocin, which is going to have an impact on the mother and the baby once they're born, because neither is getting the full whack that we are designed to get. That helps with bonding. So, the more intervention, as the rates of intervention have increased, the more likely you are to see things like postnatal depression. It's going to have an effect on feeding.
Yeah.
The list is endless.
So it's interesting because we're seeing there are actual reasons for trying to prepare for a physiological birth. And just to say to anyone who, might end up needing a cesarean for whatever reason, there is a great film called Microbirth by Tony Harmon. And in it, she talks about how to prepare to give the baby more of the microbiome, even through a cesarean. So that's worth watching if that's where you're at. But it's just, I think it's interesting because most people I know who have opted for cesareans don't realize that there's a difference. A bit like how people don't have this kind of opinion of, if formula is so readily available, it must be the same as breast milk. And I've heard it's the same and it must be the same. And they don't kind of really maybe know the difference, where there is a huge difference. So again, informed choice, like coming to it, knowing, and then making your decision from that place, I think is really vital. So,
and I think it's having the support. And I think it's the fact is that most caregivers at hospitals, midwife, unless you happen to have the midwife that you had, for example, or less you happen to have, I say forward thinking, but a really forward thinking consultant. This is not their experience. So they don't appreciate, they are giving medical advice. It's not done to make somebody's life really difficult. It's not done for the purposes of giving somebody a really negative birth experience, but they are supposed to, when something is suggested, give you the pros and the cons. They don't.
Right.
So it's not that people, if they opted for a cesarean and they didn't know any of this, there's no blame. It's not their fault. The system is not set up to support them. Same when it comes to feeding. Studies have shown that women in tribal cultures have exactly the same breastfeeding issues and difficulties that women do in modern cultures. Latching, position, sore nipples, cluster feeding, not knowing if the baby's had enough, etc., etc. But the difference is that women in these tribal cultures have their mothers, their grandmothers, their sisters, their cousins who have all been through it and are there to support them through it. In our culture, that is not the case. It used to be, when I had my babies 21 years ago, automatically, as well as the midwife coming out every day, that doesn't happen anymore. I had breastfeeding support workers come out to sit with me during a feed. I had more support. I was also incredibly lucky that my mum used to be a breastfeeding counsellor. So, I had that extra support. But it's not available. It's only available if you
pay for it.
You pay for it.
Yeah.
And what I do say in my classes is, if you are having a cesarean, if you are having an induction and people want to buy you a present, get them to club together to buy you a couple of sessions with an IBCLC for as soon as you get back from hospital, so that you can really have that help in rousing a sleepy baby, getting the latch perfected. Because for the mother, having instrumental birth or having a cesarean or having an induction, it can potentially delay the milk coming in, and that has a knock effect. So it's only if you happen to know about hypnobirthing, it's only if you happen to know about breastfeeding support, that these options are even available. It's just not set up in this country.
And I would say, even for mothers who have had vaginal births, contribute to them having a lactation consultant, because that's just priceless.
Absolutely.
And we're not set up for any of it. However, there is so much more information out there now, and I do believe that everyone can seek information on anything should they wish to. We all have access to information, and it's just up to us on how deep we want to go with it. Now, of course, your social circle will inform that. So there will be groups of people who it just won't even come to their sphere of consciousness to look for a lactation consultant or to, talk about physiological births or any of that. But if you are fortunate enough to even be listening to this podcast, then you have access to information. And if you know women who are maybe going towards birth who might not know about this, then share the information.
Yeah.
What I find challenging is once people have made up their mind and they have, well, you know, women, once they've made up their mind and they have an idea about birth, they've got a fear around it. It's like, listen, I'm going to do this because this is what feels good to me. And of course, it has to feel good to you, but I think it still doesn't come from a place of informed choice, because they're choosing not to do the research because they don't want to know, because they want to go, and that's all informed by fear. And then that makes me feel bad for them, because it's such a shame that that is their decision. It's not based on informed choice, it's based on fear. But anyway, let's empower people. Let's not talk about the negative. What can women be doing? Just say there's someone now who's hoping to get pregnant, or someone who is pregnant. What can women be doing to prepare for a positive birth, whatever that might mean to them?
So I think number one, understand, not just understand, appreciate the physiology that goes behind the process of pregnancy and birth. You know, one of the things I talk about first in my sessions is that, you know, people feel really icky about the thought of something that big coming out of something that big. How is that going to work? If we look at the actual process of a pregnancy and how our body changes and adapts, you know, our ligaments, our muscles, our joints literally move apart to accommodate a human being. The uterus, when there's nothing in it, is like a deflated balloon, and that grows to house the baby. And as soon as you've had the baby, it starts to shrink to pre-pregnancy size. The fact that our heart grows in size in order to pump the extra blood around the body. Our rib cages curve into the lung capacity to just put my phone in the drawer, to enable more space for the uterus. And our bodies adapt. Yeah, we might be a bit out of breath, but it adapts to be able to do that. The changes in our brain are happening from the hormones to make us far more in tune with our body and our baby. The chemistry of your brain is changing. And the fact that we are growing a human, in some cases, more than one, without having to do anything. So why would a system that is so awesome fail us at the point of giving birth, as much as we are led to believe by the media, by the horror stories, etc., etc.? It actually does not make sense. So really appreciating what the physiology does. So understanding what goes on in pregnancy, understanding the role of every single part and what it has to play, from the placenta to the umbilical cord to the vagina, you know, to the perineal muscles expanding as the baby's head comes through it. That, to me anyway, I think puts everything into context. Also understand, examine, look at, what are your fears? Where have they come from? They've not experienced birth before, if this is their first baby. So it's that acknowledgement that even though they haven't had a baby, they are hugely aware of what having a baby involves, but not from reliable sources. So it's acknowledging that even those beliefs have been in there, you know, from very early on. They may not be true. That's what they believe, but are they true? So examining their mindset. And
there are great books for that as well.
Absolutely.
I loved Grantley Dick Reed's The History of the Fear of Childbirth.
Yes.
And
absolutely.
Ina May's Guide to Childbirth. I'll link those both in the show notes, because for me, reading, I always say, and I say this to my clients, my members, if you want to make any change in your life at all, it will not happen unless you immerse yourself in the study of that subject, right?
Absolutely.
For example, right now we're having, sorry to go off topic, but I think this is kind of relevant. Our son has big emotions, and supporting him is challenging, let's say. So we are immersing ourselves in the study of conscious parenting. I've curated my whole Instagram feed that everything I'm seeing is homeschooling and, world schooling and, conscious parenting and parenting from, gentle parenting. And because I want to be inspired and motivated all the time to understand the information I need to know in order to be the parent that can support him in this way.
Right.
Same when I'm on my health journey. I immersed myself in the study of holistic healing, and I still do.
Yeah.
And I could only heal because I was immersed in it. So I think in this same way, if you want to learn about and understanding your body and your brain to truly believe
100%.
in what your body can do, you need to be immersed in the study of what birth and pregnancy actually are.
Read the good birth stories. Watch the amazing birth videos on YouTube. Obviously be careful what you watch, because there's some rubbish out there. But exactly, find websites that have positive birth stories on them. Find Instagram accounts that are all about the body's ability to do. And this is not setting yourself up for disappointment in case it doesn't happen, because at the end of the day, it is a physiological process. Anything can happen, but you are massively increasing your chances of birth going the way it is supposed to go by, as you say, having this information. Look at relaxation. None of us really appreciates, until we've kind of put ourselves into that state of crisis, how important relaxation is. And I don't just mean having a bath every so often as opposed to having a shower. It's really taking time to focus on breathing, understanding what that does to the nervous system, examining at your triggers and thinking how you can counteract those. And this is all stuff that can be done without forking out for a hypnobirthing course. This is, spend some time meditating, YouTube videos which kind of get you to kind of move your body. Those are the sorts of things that everybody has within their ability to access, regardless of whether you have money, don't have money, whatever. I totally obviously recommend hypnobirthing, because it's got, somebody who kind of collates it all for you and puts it together. But at the end of the day, it still has to be the willingness of the woman and her partner attending the hypnobirthing course to practice what they've learned.
Right. And I have a question about that. As I said, my experience was in part due to Daniel's willingness to participate and his, learning about how my body was working. And so him supporting me and being kind of almost like this doula, incredible birth partner. How, from the clients you've had in the past, do you see that the ones who have maybe stressy partners end up having more difficult births? And is that something do they come into you and you kind of can almost foresee it? Because I have done this. I have thought, oh God, let me be your birth partner, please. Like, he's lovely guy, whatever he can be, whatever, great husband, but don't let him be there during the birth.
100%. And I actually think that probably in the majority of cases, the hypnobirthing courses are actually for the partner more than for the woman. Yes, obviously, she often needs to be taught these things herself and these kind of realizations that she may have. But if the partner gets it, it makes all the difference, because if he gets it, she doesn't have to worry about what he's thinking.
Right. Which is a huge thing for women.
Absolutely. I mean, there is this, and for men, because there's this expectation that men will be there in the birth room. And whilst, a large amount of men would like to be there at the birth of their child, I think there's probably a fair amount that actually don't.
Yeah. Or would feel comfortable with someone saying, listen, let me be her birth partner. You can be here as much or as little as you want.
Absolutely.
Let me do the heavy lifting, so to speak. And you'll be here ready to hold your baby as soon as the baby's born.
Absolutely. Michel Audin, he's kind of one of the founders of Waterbirth, he says, ironically, because he is a man, a bathroom, it's no place for a man to be. This is why back in the day, women were supported by women,
right?
Because they get it.
And
Even
it makes
if
so
they
much
haven't
sense.
had children, there is that innate recognizability that this is women working together. This is women's power. This is women's bodies. I mean, you know, saying that, I love teaching the men because when they get it, they're damn it. And that makes, I cannot even describe the difference, because for all the reasons you said, they understand their partner's body. They understand what's supposed to happen. They understand what's not supposed to happen, and they learn to advocate.
Yes, which is so important.
That is key. You're busy giving birth. You can't advocate for yourself whilst you're in labor, because if you're advocating for yourself, your body's gone into fight or flight.
So like I would recommend to everyone, if you have a partner, like a life partner who isn't that person, no judgment on them, but get a different birthing partner, whether it's a doula, whether it's a friend, someone that gets birth and that can understand it. I mean, Danny was at the point that he, like by this, because our home birth with Vida, our second birth, he knew the essential oil combinations for different stages of labor. I mean, I wrote it all out for him, obviously, you know, which remedies, which homeopathic remedies to give at which points, you know, the food and the drink and the electrolytes and, you know, all of it. And the massage techniques that you taught us and, you know, all of it, the music and the fairy lights. Like he was on, I didn't have to do, obviously I had to give birth. He did everything else. And I truly believe that my births would have been different. And I have two friends in particular that come to mind, that one of them did hypnobirthing and she said to me, he just wasn't in it. He was like, oh yeah, whatever. And I just knew, you know, I had this feeling of, oh God, because he's a lovely guy, but he just wasn't in it, and he wasn't going to support her in the way she wanted to be supported. And they did end up having a really traumatic birth. And another friend who just had, you know, a husband who's a very, very stressy person. And the whole thing was about, and, you know, threatened to her, like you said, she was thinking about him and what he was thinking and what he needed, which is not how it should be. So I guess just a word of advice to anyone listening, get yourself a great birthing partner. I truly believe that makes all the difference.
Absolutely. And the continuity as well. So, you know, if you are going to get somebody else to be there, whether it's as well as your partner or instead of, getting to know them. I mean, it sounds obvious, but getting to know them beforehand so that you've got that continuity, because pretty much nowadays, you are not going to have the midwife that you've been seeing for your antenatal appointment be with you at the birth. You're lucky enough if you get the same midwife for every antenatal appointment.
Yeah. Do you know, I was so lucky with Vida because one of my midwives from because I was under the birthing center that was part of the hospital, and she'd got so used to hearing me talk about all my weird and wonderful things that she decided she wanted to start going into like more holistic birthing options. And she had actually gone on maternity leave once I gave birth. But she decided to come to the birth anyway. When her colleague had said, Lauren's in labor, she called her and she came. And so they both worked together. So I was so lucky because I knew both of them. They were both at my home. They stayed out of the way most of the time until the very end when I was in the pool actually giving birth. And they, like, you know, I didn't want to be measured. I did nothing. I didn't want any interferences at all. And they were so respectful of it. And after my birth, because we had all the essential oils and everything, she went and did an aromatherapy for birth course. And so it's, you know, it's amazing when you do see what these births can be, how inspiring it is, you know, and how empowering it is for women to give birth to their babies in the way that their bodies can.
You know, I just think it is such a shame. This is how it used to be. This is how it should be. The fact that this happens is not taught to midwives, you know, and that the midwife has to get that information by attending a birth of a particularly informed, you know, woman. It's just shocking. I mean, my daughters have obviously grown up with me teaching this, and we've already said, I mean, they're nowhere near that stage of life. But we've already said that, well, they have said, I've agreed, I haven't told them what they're going to do. Home birth, independent midwife, if that's even still possible by the time they have babies.
And obviously you'll be there.
Obs.
But we were just talking before about, because I asked about your daughters and how they are, and I was surprised that none of them are following in your footsteps. And I was one thing that I love about hearing about not just Indigenous cultures, but there's a lot of cultures around the world where it is still, the younger women will go with the older women and they'll, witness births or they'll see births. And, I know someone like this. She was around births from when she was really, really young, because someone in her family was the community, like village midwife. And I wish my daughter I wish I had that,
Oh,
and
yeah.
I'd love to take my daughter to see women giving birth. And we talk about birth a lot. Vida watches her birth quite often. She loves watching it, which amazes me actually, because it's but I think, I don't know, she watched it from so young that
You've always talked about it as being the most amazing thing and this special day, and so you haven't built it up to be something to be scared of. So that's probably why she watches it and has just taken in the fact that this is what a woman looks like when she's giving birth.
Right.
It can be primal, it can be animalistic. There are noises. It's not all being tucked up under a white sheet, sedated, so that nobody makes a fuss. But there is, if you are taught to believe that, there is such a beauty in that. The sound of women giving birth. I wouldn't sound like a real weirdo unless other people get it. The smell of a woman who is about to give birth, or the smell in the room. I've got goosebumps. There is nothing like it on this planet. And yes, my daughters are not following in my footsteps in the sense that they're training to do this, but they so are following in my footsteps in that they have had this information from when they were very, very young. God, I wish I'd have known then what I know now. But for example, when I just had Emily, my youngest. I remember the girls were maybe 2.5, if that. And I remember them playing at having a baby. And then Charlotte stuffed a baby up a jumper and lay on the sofa. And Sophie said, "No, stand up. It hurts less."
Wow.
They absolutely are following in my footsteps. All the mindset stuff that I have learned to, my own growth, my own change. It's not quite the same sort of journey that you've been on, but they are benefiting from that. So even though they're not necessarily doing what I'm doing, they are benefiting from the knowledge that I have acquired, which I didn't have. And hopefully I am now creating generations of women going forward who trust in their body when it comes to birth, who trust in the ability of the mind to change, who trust in the ability of being able to break cycles and be change makers. And so in answer to your question, they flipping well are following in my footsteps.
Yeah, amazing. What's your take on the 40 days, staying at home for 40 days after you've had a baby?
Yeah, I mean, I think some version of that. I think maybe 40 days might be a bit much for many people, but I definitely think the culture around that needs to change as well. At the very least, it should be 5 days in the bed, 5 days near the bed, and 5 days around the bed.
Yeah.
I can totally understand that, with a new baby, you want to show it off, you want to introduce it to your parents, your in-laws, your brothers, your sisters, your nieces and nephews. But I think what people don't appreciate until they've had a baby is how tired a woman is and how vulnerable she is. And especially if she's breastfeeding, getting to grips with that when you're in the state where it's not just a question of kind of baby latches on, you have to do a whole basic strip off in order to kind of position one tiny little baby, which you're not going to do if your father-in-law is sitting in the room. I think there is far too much emphasis on being, back in your skinny jeans and at the shopping centre taking selfies with your cappuccino. Great. If that's what you want to do, go for it. But I really think there is not enough honour, there is not enough respect, there is not enough understanding of what it means to be birthed into motherhood.
Yeah.
And I honestly believe, and I am sure there's probably science to back this up, but you know, the more time a new mother, a new father, a new family give to just adapting to having this new human in their lives, the less they're going to be affected by postnatal depression, the less they're going to be feel that they're on some schedule, or the baby needs to have to be on some schedule. The more they're going to trust in their instinct, the more they're going to actually sort of get to know their baby. Probably the higher there'll be higher breastfeeding rates. Yeah, not enough acknowledgement of that matrescence, that sort of period where your body's doing something completely odd and your head's doing something else, and there's so much pressure to kind of be a certain way, look a certain way, behave a certain way.
Yeah, I think it's a very sacred time, and you taught me it was called the physiological.
Yeah, the fourth trimester.
The fourth trimester, yeah, no, the physiological third stage, or is that something else?
When the placenta comes out, yeah.
When the placenta comes out. The fourth trimester, that those 3 months. I'm not saying stay at home for 3 months, but you know, I have a lot of friends who follow the Ayurvedic approach, and so they do the 40 days. I didn't do the 40 days. I very much honoured my body and my space and the sacredness of that. But I went for walks. I felt that was important for me. But
I think there's
fabulous about having a home birth was giving birth in the lounge, then having everyone clear everything up. I went for a shower, got into bed with my baby. It was amazing.
Yeah,
you know, just unbelievable. So yeah, I mean, I'm all for home births when it's possible. It was the best experience of my life.
Yeah,
it really was.
And most people who have home births, planned home births, say that. It's just such a shame that unless you happen to be really proactive, it's not available.
Yeah,
for lots of people.
Yeah, there are a lot of people who, you know, it wouldn't be possible for. But just say someone's listening to this now and they're thinking, this has kind of empowered me to look more into this. And I feel like maybe I can educate myself into understanding that my body is super powerful, and maybe I'll opt for a home birth, or maybe, you know, go to a birthing center instead of a hospital ward. What are the best ways to kind of prepare for that?
First of all, explore your options, see what is available in your area. You know, most trusts will have a home birth option. It just depends very much on how well funded they are and how well, you know, let's say experience, but how often these midwives go out to attend the home births, because, you know, a lot say they've got home births midwives, but actually when push comes to shove, if you'll excuse the pun, you know, they call the women to go into the hospital. So really kind of explore what your options are, and potentially if that trust doesn't provide what you want, explore other areas which you can self-refer to. Know your rights as well, because when we say home birth is only an option for certain groups of people, often there are so many tick boxes that have to remain. Well, it depends which way you look at it. You know, you have to be under a certain age, under a certain weight, carrying one baby, you know, be healthy, not have gestational diabetes, etc. There's so many stumbling blocks where generally it will be ruled out. And that's not necessarily the case, because at the end of the day, it is always your choice. So I would, there's a great resource, somebody called Dr. Sarah Wickham. Have you heard of her, Lauren? Yeah, she does a lot of, she basically translates a lot of the studies. And in most cases, if you wanted to argue that you had every right to give birth at home, even though you had gestational diabetes, for example, there's lots of information on gestational diabetes, which will inform you, and at the very least, give you the information so you know what questions to ask.
Yeah. I had that with your iron's too low, so you probably won't be able to have a home birth.
Yeah. So it's the information is out there. Prepare yourself. So again, nowadays, if you go past, well, it's now 41 weeks. It used to be 42 weeks of pregnancy. You wouldn't be allowed a home birth. Do your research, because actually nobody can tell you you are not allowed, because you're not 5. You know, a fully compos mentis adult who is capable of making the decisions once you know the benefits and the risks. Look at risks. When we talk about risks, what are the actual figures? Don't just take the percentages. So if you're told something doubles, that's scary. But if you look at the actual figures, it could be something like 0.01 increasing to 0.02, doubling, but it's negligible still. So get all the information, weigh up the pros and cons of whatever set of circumstances you are in, so that you can decide what is right for you, what is wrong for you, or even if you decide or agree or whatever it is to go down the medical route, you are aware of the potential stumbling blocks that might present themselves, and acquire the skills that help you to counteract that. It's going in with knowledge. So even if you started off wanting a straightforward physiological birth and end up with a highly medicalized cesarean, but you have been a part of the decision-making process every step of the way, you're going to have a positive birth experience. You know, if you don't.
Yeah, that's how I think so many women I know, it's taken out of their hands, and afterwards it takes them years to recover from that feeling that the decision was just taken out of their hands.
Absolutely. Because I always say, I say it so much, I should actually get a t-shirt printed on it with it. The birth is not the end of something. It is the start of the rest of your lives as parents. And you need to be in the best possible place, physically, mentally, and emotionally, to do that. Because having the baby is the easy part. Being a parent,
yeah,
and it never ends. You know, you're always a parent. And I'm all right with babies, but 21-year-olds.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
You know, so you owe it to yourself. You owe it to your children. You owe it to their children to equip yourself so that you can be in the best place possible once this baby's born, whether that is advocating for a straightforward physiological birth or discussing all the possible interventions that could result from one intervention happening, and knowing what you can do to counteract that.
Yeah. Some good practical tools. I'd like to end with this, because you and I have spoken about this. When I spoke to you about, you know, what my births were like, they completely reflect the personalities of my children. So Braxton's birth was challenging. He wanted to come early. It had to be at 38 weeks, and he had to be back to back. And it wasn't anything severely awful. It was just slightly out the box, not anything you can really give a name to. But it was challenging, and it remained challenging, and that is him. And then Vida was this like, I'm just going to take my time. It's going to be 40 weeks, so it's not bad, but it's going to be 40 plus 3, just so, you know, to give myself a bit more time. And, you know, at home, just beautiful birth, easy, you know, and like a bit of fierceness there at the end, but, you know. And my mum says the same about me. She said, you had to be born on your actual due date. Everything had to be exactly perfect. And I wonder if you see this yourself, because I've always thought, like, I think that there is an energetic thing that our personalities are reflected in our births.
Without doubt. I mean, that's another whole topic of conversation, isn't it? I mean, I know with my twins, Sophie, who came first, she is the leader. As in, she is the one that is kind of braver than her sister. Charlotte was very reluctant and very reticent to actually come out. And I actually believe if it had just been her in there on her own, she wouldn't have been born when she was, because I think she needed to cook for a bit longer. Right. And she's much more timid. She needs Sophie to kind of go and ask the questions and do the work beforehand.
So she said to Sophie, you go out first and make sure everything's okay, and I'll come on after when you let me know.
And just let me know that they're all good, and this nutter that's been carrying us around for the past 9 months is, not too bad. And then with my youngest, she kept us on our toes. She was coming, then she wasn't, then she was coming, then she wasn't, then she was coming, then she wasn't, and when she came, and her umbilical cord split. So I think you had that with Braxton, which is always quite dramatic. But she has been always a little, go-getter. Once she decides she's doing something, there ain't no stopping her. It's actually the only time in her life she has ever been late. I say late. It was later than the due date we were given. She is now obsessive about being early, and unfortunately as a family we are quite tardy. Cannot bear it. But she's a trailblazer. She was from the start, and
it's an interesting thing to observe for anyone listening. Just have a think about your kids or yourselves or people does your birth reflect your personality? I don't know, just a bit of empirical fun, I guess. This has been fun as well. Thank you for always empowering us with education and information. I'm going to put all your details in the show notes, of course, but let people know where they can find you.
So I am at www.mamaserene.co.uk, and on Instagram it's Dani Diosi _coaching, because there is actually another Dani Diosi.
Wow.
Man, I think in Hungary. God.
There's another Lauren Vaknin in LA.
Is there? There you go.
I know, crazy.
One of us. And also, if that's okay with you, if anybody is interested in training to teach people hypnobirthing, if I give you a discount code to put in the show notes,
that would be amazing. We love a discount code.
So
great. So we haven't pre-discussed that, so we'll put that in the show notes.
Okay.
Absolutely. No, I mean, we haven't. I don't have the code yet, but that would be amazing.
I will get that to you.
Because I'm sure there'll be a lot of people listening who'll be interested in that. And as Dani is not doulaing anymore, I do have some resources for that. And a great friend of mine who is doing kind of positive birth preparation as well. So lots of resources, all the books we've spoken about as well will all be there. So make sure to spend some time in the show notes. And thank you for being here again.
My greatest pleasure. I've enjoyed it thoroughly.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Reconditioned. I am honestly so grateful to each and every person that tunes in. Thank you also for taking responsibility for your own well-being. You should know that just by choosing to listen to podcasts like this that further your well-being, you're moving more deeply into abundance consciousness. Now, don't forget, I have a bunch of free resources over at laurenvaknin.co.uk, as well as every recommendation you could ever need in regards to your well-being on the LV Recommends page, all categorized for your ease. Thank you also to our sponsors. These episodes would not be possible without them, so make sure to check them out and get some pretty awesome discounts on the show notes. And of course, make sure you're subscribed to the podcast so that you can get updated each time a new one is released. Thank you. I appreciate you.